Hi all, welcome to Shankar IAS Academy's daily newspaper analysis 21st January 2025. Here I am Monika Ravishankar who is presenting today's news analysis. Before getting to the today's list of articles, let's see the important announcement from Shankar IAS Academy regarding mock interview which was conducted on January 27, 28 and 29 and also 30th of January 2025 in our main branch which is located in Ananagar with the expert former UPSC board members. If you want to be the part of this mock interview sessions, there are limited slots are there. So contact and register yourself with Shankar IAS Academy and mock interview mode is offline. Venue is Shankar IAS Academy's main building, Chennai, which is located in Shanti Colony, Ananagar. Join this mock interview, get evaluated by former UPSC board members. Without any delay, let's get into today's list of articles. Look at this list of articles. The first article, which is taken from the Hindu newspaper, which talks about Mullai Periyar Dam. In this article, we are going to see about Dam Safety Act 2021 from prelims point of view. The second article, which is also taken from the Hindu newspaper, which talks about Pakistan's airport which was funded by China. In this article, we are going to see about Bilton Road initiative and impact of Bilton Road initiatives on India from prelims and mains point of view. Look at this third article which is taken from the Indian Express which talks about Lieutenant Governor of Delhi ordered fresh drive against illegal immigrants. In this article, we are going to see in detail about illegal immigrants and their constitutional provisions from prelims point of view. Look at this fourth article which is taken from the Indian Express which talks about death penalty cases. In this article, we are going to see about severity of death penalty cases and analysis of mitigation and aggravative circumstances of the criminal cases and also the consideration of accused nature and motive of the crime. In this article, we are going to see in detail about rarest of rare doctrine which was considered as the deciding factor for death sentences. Got this slide in yesterday's news analysis session. In one of the MCQ, we have made the slide error. Let's discuss and sort it out. Look at this question. Consider the following statement regarding the La Fuso exercise. It is a multilateral naval exercise hosted by France in the Indo-Pacific region. Statement 2. The exercise primarily focuses on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. Option 3. India participates in the exercise along with the countries like USA, Japan and Australia. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Options are 1 and 2 only, option B 2 and 3 only, option C 1 and 3 only, option D 1, 2 and 3. Here the correct answer is 1 and 2 only. Yesterday it was mistakenly said as 1 and 3 only because statement 3 is clearly wrong because India participates in exercise along with the countries like USA and Australia, not Japan. Japan is not a part of this exercise. So statement 3 is wrong. Look at this article which explains how courts determine death penalty sentences by evaluating mitigation and aggravation circumstances, which focusing on the Supreme Court's guidelines in such cases. It also highlights factors like age, reform potential and nature of offence, which is going to emphasizing the evolving jurisprudence around the doctrine of rarest of rare. This article also discusses the need for judge-centric approaches and balancing justice with humanity. In this article, we are going to see about some of the benchmark cases regarding death penalties and what is rarest of rare doctrine, how it helps to analyze the circumstances analysis towards death penalty by Supreme Court judges, and also the analysis of nature of offences and the judicial variations. From prelims point of view, in this article we are going to see about doctrine of rarest of rare in detail and how it helps to decide the death penalties. That is the core concept which will help us to understand the procedure of death penalty sentences all over India and its procedures with impeachment measures. First, we are going to see about Bachan Singh versus State of Punjab case 1980. This case is a benchmark case with respect of death penalties for for its innovative implementation of rarest of rare doctrine. Now let's see what is rarest of rare doctrine. As per this doctrine, death penalty can be imposed when there is no possibility of reformation. That is, in the case of worst situation, there is no implication. In that situation, we have to go with the death penalty. If there any possibility to come out from this variant or punishment, there should not be establishment of death penalties should not be happen as per the Indian judicial stance. As per this doctrine, there should be a 5-judge constitutional bench laid down the non-exhaustive list of aggravating and mitigating circumstances for the court to consider while making the decision of death penalties. This is the most innovative steps towards death penalty decision, which have to be proven with aggravating and mitigation circumstance against the crime and the criminal who does the crime, so that judges can clearly demonstrate the reason behind the death penalties and the severity of the crime. With this all, we have to see some of the key judgments in Bachan Singh and Punjab case 1980. In the angle of constitutional affirmation, in the stance of constitutionality affirmed, the court upheld the constitutionality of the death penalty, which stating it doesn't violate Article 14, 19 and 21 of the Indian Constitution, which is essential to the citizens who are lived in the premises of Indian territory. The second one is rarest of rare doctrine, which was introduced the principle that the death penalty should be imposed only in the rare of rare cases where the alternative option is unquestionably foreclosed. That is, there is no way to go. In that situation we have to conclude with the death penalty. If any possibilities are there, we should not give such death penalties to the criminals. The third one is balancing test. This balancing test mandates that judges must weigh both aggravating and mitigative circumstances related to crime and the criminal before deciding on the death sentences. And also the special reason requirement. When it comes to this emphasizes that courts must provide special reasons for awakening the death penalty, which ensuring a thorough and individualized sentencing process. The last one is focus on reform. In this focus, this case highlighted the importance of considering the possibility of reform and rehabilitation of the accused before imposing this death sentences. On the whole, this case generalized that death penalty should not be given without any proper investigation regarding criminals and also the crime with the aggravative and mitigation circumstances of that case. That is, without any situation, we have to move on to death penalties. If any possibilities are there, there should be the reform and rehabilitation to that criminal who does that crime. I hope you guys are all clear about this judgment. Let's move on to aggravative circumstances of this case. When it comes to aggravative circumstances, the first and foremost thing is extreme cruelty or brutality in the crime, which is involved by the criminal who does that crime. The second one is premeditation or planning of the crime. If the crime is defensive in nature, that is not going to be in the serious note. If it is planned, means that should be punishable with the severe death penalties is the reason behind this circumstance. The third one is crime's impact on society, such as murder of public officials, police officers, person of armed force while on duty. If the crime comes under this list should be considered to be the death penalties. And the last one is if that murder involves the exceptional depravity. That is, these four circumstances or take it into the stand while discussing about the death penalties to the criminal. If any one of this criteria is involved in that crime or did by the criminal, that criminal should be punished under death sentences. With this all, we have to know about some of the mitigation circumstances towards the criminal cases. The first one is, when it comes to mitigation, the first one is age. Age of the accused, with younger or older individual often treated more leniently according to the Indian jurisdiction. In this case, the accused mental stability or incapability to understand the criminality of the action which was done by him or her will be considered as the mitigation measures, because they are done this crime without their knowledge or proper mental with the proper mental health. The third one is probability of reform and rehabilitation. If any probability towards reform and rehabilitation towards the accused, that should be take it as considered for the accused to get out of death penalty. The fourth one is acting under someone else's direction or influence. If the criminal is acting under someone's direction or influence, will not be considered under the very serious crime, because that accused is influenced by some other person to do that crime. More than accused, that influencer should be the punishable person in this case. Last one is if the accused believed that action is morally justified. From the accused point of view, if this crime is done under the circumstances of defense mechanism to escape them from the very crucial situation, that is situational crime. If it is the situational crime that accused believed their action is morally justified, then it is take it as a mitigation circumstance under the criminal cases. As per the Indian jurisdiction, these are all the mitigation circumstances towards the criminal cases. If the accused is come under any one of this case, the punishment will be get reduced, and they are considered to be the reform and rehabilitation towards that crime. They are trained and given counseling towards that crime, and reason behind the crime was clearly demonstrated to that accused. The third one is judges should consider the nature of offence before deciding to the death sentences to the accused. That criminal case that was happened at the which circumstance and situation. Judge should analyze that situation and the nature of the offence. The first one is nature of the offence. That is, inconsistent judgments in similar cases have been criticized under Shankar Kishan Rao Hande versus State of Maharashtra case 2013, which was benchmark case towards this nature of offences done by the accused. In this, courts have shifted towards judge-centric sentencing, leaving room for subjectivity. When it comes to possibility of reform, courts are required to consider the accused potential for rehabilitation, that is Bachan Singh's principle, and also Law Commission 2015, which advocated that the death penalty should be restricted to terror cases, which is stressing the importance of reform-oriented judgments. The third one is separate trial for sentencing. Supreme Court ruling which emphasizes separate hearing to consider mitigating and aggravating factors after the post-conviction, which was done by the accused. This will ensure the fair elevation of circumstances and situation towards this crime. These are all the Indian jurisdictions towards the criminal cases and terror cases which are considered for the death penalties. When it comes to death penalties, that death penalty sentence was completely and thoroughly examined with the various circumstances, with rarest of rare doctrine, nature of offense, and also the mitigation and aggravative circumstances analysis. This is all about the Indian jurisdiction's death penalty sentence procedure. With this knowledge, try to solve the prelims practice question. Consider the following statement about rarest of rare doctrine in Indian jurisdiction. Statement 1. It was established in Bachan Singh vs. State of Punjab case 1980. It requires consideration of possibility of reforming the accused before imposing the death penalty. And also this doctrine emphasizes the consideration of both mitigation and aggravating circumstances towards the crime. Which of the given statements are correct regarding rarest of rare doctrine is the question. The options are option A 1 and 2 only, option B 1 and 3 only, option C 1, 2 and 3, option D 2 and 3 only. The correct answer is option C 1, 2 and 3. All the three statements of this question was correct regarding rarest of rare doctrine of Indian jurisdiction. With this, let's move on to the next article. Look at this article. This article talks about China funded Gwadar Airport of Pakistan, which is the Pakistan's largest airport, which is now operational, which enhancing Gwadar's strategic importance under China-Pakistan economic corridor, which costing $230 million, which complements the deep sea route built by China, providing Beijing direct access to Arabian Sea shipping lanes and boosting trade as a part of its Belt and Road Initiative. In this article, we are going to see about Belt and Road Initiative in detail for prelims point of view. Let's see what is a Belt and Road Initiative and its history and evaluation and strategic importance towards Belt and Road Initiative and towards China-Pakistan economic corridor, which enhances the trade activities of China in Arabian Sea, and also we have to concentrate on India's point of view towards Belt and Road Initiative. This Belt and Road Initiative was launched by China, which was launched in 2013 by Chinese President Xi Jinping. When it comes to scope, it covers 140 plus countries, aiming to enhance global connectivity through infrastructure development like railways, ports and roads, with the foremost objectives to promote trade, economic cooperation and cultural enhances among particular nations. Under this Belt and Road Initiative, China takes some of the key projects to enhance their trade activities with the neighboring countries, especially with Pakistan. They are China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Hambantota Port of Sri Lanka, and the Gwadar Port of Pakistan. These are all the projects under the Belt and Road Initiative, which was taken by China to enhance trade activities of their comfort. With this all, we have to concentrate on funding activities of these projects. Funding was primarily financed by Chinese bank, including the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is helpful for all the Asian countries towards the infrastructure development. And also we have to concentrate on strategic significance, that is expands China's geopolitical influence and ensure energy security by accessing key maritime security routes with the help of Belt and Road Initiative of China, which was launched in 2013. This topic was very important from prelims point of view and also mains point of view in respect to international relations. So take note of it for your prelims preparation. Let's see the road map of Belt and Road Initiative in this map. So see this map, this blue line indicates the overland route of Belt and Road Initiative, and the pink line demonstrates the maritime route of Belt and Road Initiative. These are all the important countries that is approximately 140 plus countries involved in this Belt and Road Initiative, and they are going to be the sufferers and beneficiaries towards the trade activities in this Belt and Road area. This area covers Netherlands, Germany, Moscow, Kazakhstan, Beijing. That is, all the countries are easily accessible from Xi'an and Beijing of China. That is the capital of China, which is very active in trade activity. When it comes to maritime route of Belt and Road Initiative, India also covered in this Belt and Road Initiative maritime route, and also Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Italy, Venice, and Swiss Canal also connected to this maritime route of Belt and Road Initiative. Now, in this article, we are highlighting this Gwadar port that was constructed by China's fund in Pakistan, and also in Sri Lanka it was Hambantota port, which was built under the fund of China in the favor of trade activities towards Chinese economic development. I hope you guys are very clear about this map. We can expect this. We can expect questions from map point of view from this Belt and Road Initiative topic. As of now, we are discussing about Belt and Road Initiative of China in detail. Now, let's see the impacts of Belt and Road Initiative on India. When it comes to impacts on India, we can categorize this impacts in political, economic, and social manner. First, we have to see the political circumstance of India on Belt and Road Initiative. First one is strategic challenges. Projects like China-Pakistan Economic Corridor passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in India, which was challenging to India's sovereignty. Second one is China's influence. Increasing China's presence in South Asia, that is Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, may isolate India regionally. Regional instability. This will heighten the tension due to infrastructure projects in sensitive areas like Gwadar and Hambantota, which is completely sensitive towards India's trade activities, because of this projects India was isolated from the regionally. Let's see some of the economic impacts of Belt and Road Initiative. Trade competition. Belt and Road Initiative could create alternative trade routes bypassing India, which impacting its trade revenues directly. Second one is debt diplomacy. Partner nations' economic reliance on China could shift regional economic dynamic against India because of funding of China towards the neighboring country of India. They will act favor to the China that will be threatening to India's trade stability. Connectivity advantage. If India counters Belt and Road Initiative with its projects like Chabahar Port, Quad Initiative, it could balance this China's influence in the Arabian Sea part, which also threatens the trade activities of India. Now, let's see some of the social impacts of Belt and Road Initiative on India. When it comes to social impacts, the first one is border tension. Increasing infrastructure near India-China border could exaggerate security concerns in India. Cultural influence. Potential spread of Chinese soft power through cultural exchange programs. Job competition. Chinese funded projects may attract regional laborers, which indirectly impacting India's workforce. With this all we can write with this all knowledge we can write prelims and mains question regarding Belt and Road Initiative. Hope you guys are all clear about this topic. So let's solve the prelims practice question regarding this topic. Look at this question. This question is match the following type question, which is based on map. That is we have seen earlier in this topic. The question is Belt and Road projects and content. Under Belt and Road projects, China's initiative towards the neighboring countries of India. The first one is Gwadar Port, Hambantota Port, and East Coast Rail Link. These are all the projects under Belt and Road Initiative, which was initiated by China. Let's match the countries towards these projects. First one is Gwadar Port. It was associated with Pakistan, right? Second one is Hambantota Port, which is located in Sri Lanka. The third one is East Coast Rail Link, that is none other than Malaysia. According to this matches, the option A is the correct answer. Gwadar Port is located in Pakistan. Hambantota Port is located in Sri Lanka. East Coast Rail Link was located in Malaysia. With this, let's move on to next article. Look at this article, which panel is better for Mullai Periyar, which was the question asked by Supreme Court to Tamil Nadu and Kerala government. In this article, we are going to see about Mullai Periyar Dam and its constitutional safeguards, and also the Dam Safety Act 2021. As per this act, we have to concentrate on the key provisions of this act with the help of National Dam Safety Authority and state dam safety organizations. These are all the important points regarding prelims point of view. So take note on this article. When it comes to location, this Mullai Periyar Dam was located in the borders of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So Supreme Court asked both the governments to act on this safety of the Mullai Periyar Dam. They are asked to decide whether the court's supervisory committee or the statutory committee under the 2021 Dam Safety Act, which is better to act on this safety of Mullai Periyar Dam. Now let's see some of the constitutional safeguards towards dam safety in India. When it comes to constitutional safeguards, the first one is it was constituted under the Union List of Indian government, that is central government of India should decide on this dam safety under the Union List entry 56. That is, interstate river and river valley empowers parliament to legislate. The second one is entry 17 of concurrent list. It allows both the center and state to legislate on water facilitating cooperative efforts in dam safety. When it comes to constitutional provisions, Article 246, that is, divides legislative power between state and center, which enabling the enactment of Dam Safety Act under the Union List. The next article is about Article 256, which ensures that state laws comply with central laws, allowing for seamless implementation of Dam Safety Act. The last one is Article 21, which is broader to all the provisions of citizens' liberty towards their lifestyle. That is, indirectly supports dam safety as a measure to protect the right to life and personal safety of citizens who are all living in the premises of India. First, we have seen about constitutional safeguards towards dam safety in India. Now, let's move on to the Dam Safety Act 2021 and its key provisions. Under this Dam Safety Act 2021, there is two organizations or categories to inspect the dam safety of Mullai Periyar. The first one is National Committee on Dam Safety and the second one is National Dam Safety Authority. Let's see one by one. First, when it comes to National Commission on Dam Safety, it was chaired by the chairperson of the Central Water Commission, which served as the apex body under the chairmanship, which ensure, and also its foremost objective to ensure the uniform implementation of safety measures across India's dams. And this institution will develop dam safety policy standards and guidelines under the center's direction, and also reviews the dam safety measures and disaster prevention protocols of the particular dam. These are all the roles and responsibilities of National Committee on Dam Safety. Let's move on to National Dam Safety Authority. This National Dam Safety Authority is a regulatory body which ensuring the safety and integrity of dams across India while fostering coordination between central and state agencies, and also ensures implementation of dam safety policies and resolves disputes between states regarding dam safety. It also maintains the national database of dams and monitor complaints with safety measures of the dam. These are all the roles and responsibilities of National Dam Safety Authority. Let's see the composition of National Dam Safety Authority of India. When it comes to composition, chairperson, an officer not below the rank of additional secretary to the Government of India who is appointed by the central government will be the chairperson and the overseer of this National Dam Safety Authority of India. When it comes to members, they are categorized under different categories. The first one is executive directors. An office under this executive directors, an officer not below the rank of joint secretary who are responsible for daily operations. The next one is technical specialist, that is experts in dam engineering, hydrology, geology and other allied fields which are related to dam safety, who are all called as technical specialists. And they are representatives for the Central Water Commission, which provides technical and policy guidelines to dam safety measures. Supporting staffs. The last one is supporting staffs, who are all individuals, includes administrative and technical teams to assist in fulfilling the authority's responsibilities towards dam safety, which was categorized under the key provisions of Dam Safety Act 2021. As of now, we are saying about National Dam Safety Authority. As of now, we are seeing National Dam Safety Authority. Now, let's see some of the crux of State Dam Safety Organization. Each state must establish its own state dam safety organization to monitor the safety of dams within its jurisdiction. They should conduct regular inspection and maintenance with the safety protocols. The last one is dam owners' responsibility. That is, owners of dams are required to perform regular inspection and risk assessment towards dam. And also they have to prepare and maintain emergency action plan and operation manuals. And also implement time-bound safety measures to prevent dam facilities if it is a dam failure. With this all, I hope you guys are clear about Dam Safety Rules Act 2021. Try to solve a prelims practice question. Look at this question, which is about Dam Safety Act 2021. Consider the following statements regarding the Dam Safety Act 2021. Statement 1. The National Committee on Dam Safety is chaired by the Union Minister for Jal Shakti. The second statement is National Dam Safety Authority resolves dispute between states concerning dam safety. The Act applies to all dams in India regardless of their height. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Option A 1 and 2 only, option B 2 only, option C 1 and 3 only, option D 1, 2 and 3. The correct answer is option B 2 only, because option 1 and 3 was wrong. Option 2 only the correct answer according to the Dam Safety Act 2021. Now let's move on to next article. Look at this article. This article highlights the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi ordered a crackdown on illegal immigrants, particularly Bangladeshi and Rohingya workers, following the arrest of Bangladeshi national for attacking actor Saif Ali Khan. This directive aims to identify and deport undocumented immigrants due to their alleged involvement in criminal activities and labor law violations. And this issue also highlights concerns over unauthorized employment practices in India and also questions the national security. Let's see this article in detail. For that, first we have to know who are all the illegal immigrants. When it comes to illegal immigrants, according to section 2B of the Foreign Act 1946 and elaborated in the Citizenship Act 1955, an illegal migrant is defined as a foreigner who entered India without valid travel document like passport or visa, who are overstays beyond the permitted time after entering with valid documents. They are all considered as the illegal immigrants as per the Section 2B of Foreign Act 1946 and the elaboration with the Citizenship Act 1955. When it comes to source of illegal immigration, India faces primarily include peoples entered through porous borders, especially from Bangladesh and Myanmar. And also the main reason behind is foreign nationals who are overstaying their visas and Rohingya refugees who are entering without proper documents within the premise of India. Let's see the constitutional and legal provisions towards this illegal immigration. Article 19. This article guarantees certain freedom to Indian citizens, including the right to reside and settle in any part of India. However, these rights are exclusively available to citizens of India and not to foreigners or illegal migrants. The second one is Article 21. This article ensures that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. The term person includes both citizens and non-citizens, thereby extending the right of life and personal liberty to all individuals, including illegal immigrants. The third one is the Passport Entry into India Act 1920. It requires foreigners to possess valid passport to enter into India. The another one is Foreigners Act 1946, which provides power to regulate foreigners' entry, stay and exit according to the Act. It also provides the legal framework for identifying and deporting illegal immigrants who are all without having proper documents and overstaying beyond the limit of their visa. The third one is Citizenship Act 1955. This Citizenship Act 1955 clearly prohibits illegal immigrants from acquiring Indian citizenship. That defines process for naturalization and citizenship in special cases. That is, for example, minority refugees from neighboring countries under the 2019 amendment. The another one is National Register of Citizens. The NRC is an official record of those who are legal Indian citizens. The foremost purpose is to identify and deport illegal immigrants from India. The recent updates focuses on Assam to identify illegal immigrants. The process has significant socio-political implications in the society. The last one is identification mechanism. Documents like Aadhaar, voter ID, which are used to establish identity and citizenship of India. However, their effectiveness in distinguished citizens from illegal immigrants has been subject to debate. As of now, we are learning about illegal immigrants and their constitutional provisions in India with the identification mechanism. Let's see some of the institutions and agencies who are all involved in this illegal immigration alienation from India. The first one is Border Security Force, who are tasked with guarding India's land border, plays a crucial role in preventing illegal immigration, particularly along the India-Bangladesh and India-Pakistan borders. The second agency is National Investigation Agency. As the Central Counter-Terrorism Agency, this will investigate offences related to national security, including cases with illegal immigration, intersects with terrorist activities within the premises of India. The foremost thing is Ministry of Home Affairs, that is foremost authority to formulate and implement policies related to internal security, including immigrant laws and management of illegal immigration within the Indian premises. These are all the importance behind the illegal immigration and the broader view of illegal immigration with the Indian security threat. With this all information, try to write a prelims practice question. Look at this question. Which of the following statement about illegal immigrants in India is correct? They are defined under Citizenship Act 1955. Statement 2. Illegal migrants are eligible for Indian citizenship under the NRC process. Option A, 1 only. Option B, 2 only. Option C, both 1 and 2. Option D, neither 1 nor 2. The correct answer is 1 only. Coming to the conclusion, if you like this video, hit like, do comment your valuable feedbacks and share it to your friends and family. At the end, don't forget to subscribe this Shankar IAS Academy's YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more useful videos. Thank you.